So now that we're familiarized with the cost and the margin of contributions, we know how to set up a price so that the company can generate a certain economic value above a certain level of activity. Okay? But you might be thinking, what do costs have to do with setting prices? And you will be right. If we had started simply with cost, this will be a bottom-up approach to pricing. In principle, however, you should not be thinking just about cost. It is much better to think about what's the ultimate objective of marketing, which, as you recall, is to generate value for customers. The best way to price, if you possibly can, is to first begin with the customer and try to think, how much value can I actually create? Oftentimes, value is unrelated to the cost that we have just explained, but you will see why both are important. Okay? Value to customers. The more value you generate for them, the more you exceed their expectations, the higher the price you will be able to charge. So thinking in terms of value or a top-down approach is probably, or is a better strategy, also known as value pricing, trying to charge as much to each customer as he or she values your product or service. So doesn't mean that all the value that you generate for consumers you will be able to capture for yourself in the form of a price? Not necessarily, because different customers or different segments will not necessarily perceive the value in the same way. Some people will value the product more, other people will value the product less. But irrespectively of who values more or less the product or service, what is critical for you is to be able to communicate clearly and consistently some of the value that you have created to the customers. If you don't communicate the value properly, there is going to be a lower perception of what the value is of that particular product or service. Communication, though, will be the focus of week number 4 of this course. But why is the value perception important? Well, it's because people will typically have a willingness to pay for your product or service that normally is lower than their perceived value. Otherwise, they will not get any value themselves from the product if you're trying to charge them all. So the willingness to pay for the product or service is typically lower than the absolute perceived value. And once the people set in their minds these levels of willingness to pay, your actual price will be actually inferior to the maximum willingness to pay. Okay? So if your price is about the total cost for the company, then you will have captured some value for the enterprise and for yourself. In the meantime, what is the value to the consumer? Obviously, is the difference between the price that you've decided to charge for your product or service and their perceived value of the product. So the aim of marketing is not only to create the value for the consumers, but to also be able to communicate it in a compelling and clear way so as to maximize the perceived value of your product or service, and in essence, being able to create more value for the consumers and for yourself.